Great to see so many people out on such a gorgeous afternoon, and we'll leave the door open as long as we can for the last of that fall breeze. Welcome. So I'm Maya, I'm the alumni director and class of 91. And over the last year, with a lot of help from Kate and other folks, we developed an alumni speaker series where we're trying to capture some of the amazing entrepreneurial spirit that is present in essentially every single Marlboro alum. And how many other alums do we have in the room? Yeah, nice. Yay, me, yay, awesome. And so Kathy actually started connecting with Dagmawi. She was a previous admissions director a few years ago, and lucky for me, I was able to pick up that conversation, and it turned out that he was going to be back doing some exciting things. He is the program manager for Africa for Grounds of Health, which is a coffee collective-ish, vehicle for social change that is actually headquartered here in Vermont. He'll talk about that. Simultaneously, he is research and innovation advisor for Ya Coffee and Slow Brew Safaris, and co-founder of Haystack Coffee Collaborative, which this is so cool, and I don't know how much you're going to talk about this, but a little over a year ago, we have Gretchen Haverluck with us today, who's the economic development director for the town of Wilmington, and Wilmington did this really cool contest, which was called Make It on Main Street. They had an angel investor who said, hey, look, I have got $50,000 I'm willing to give to a company to find a place on Main Street.
It was 20.
Oh, 20.
It was 20.
Okay.
It was 20.
It was,
Nice.
yeah.
It's a better story when I tell it, Gretchen.
Right. I wish it was like that.
So they did this. It got national news. It was this big search, and people came from all over the region and all over the world and responded to this call, consider my business proposal. And it was also a really amazing business coaching opportunity for entrepreneurs from all over. They got to spend some time with Gretchen and some other folks on a committee that said, this is an awesome proposal, here's how you can make it better, this is a terrible business plan, but this is how you can make it work, and really kind of helping to train entrepreneurs, because we know how important it is to have tons of them in the world right now, because we need to be able to take care of ourselves. Dagmawi, and his friends, the now Haystack Coffee Collaborative, were sort of the runners-up in that contest and have decided to move forward with establishing a coffee shop community, a space for community and coffee in Wilmington. So he's doing this from Ethiopia with some local partners and some not local partners, and it's a really cool example of getting people together at a lot of different levels and setting them up for success. And then founder of
Dai Coffee.
Dai Coffee.
Yes.
Class of 98.
Yes.
John Hayes was his plan sponsor. And we're just really excited and lucky to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Maya. It's been more than 20 years since I've been on this campus. So since I left, I never came back. So as we were driving up, I would have to say it was emotionally quite mixed. Excitement, anxious. I didn't think it would elicit a lot of exciting things in my head. So I actually went back and I had to add one slide because it reminded me of some of the things I forgot to include in here as it relate to the context of my presentation. So I'll just go right into the talk because Maya has said a lot. And I made the presentation to be as relatable to students as it is to people who are in the middle of their careers, if not at a later stage, because that's where I am. It's hard to believe it's 20 plus years ago that I was a graduate from Marlboro. I know physically I don't look like it, and it's only my wife that complains about that these days, which is fine. So this has been a journey. It was never easy. I grew up in a coffee consuming family household. With my grandmother, I've started drinking coffee maybe 5, if not earlier, at the age of 5 earlier. In Ethiopia, coffee is big, but we never really think of it. It's so normal. So, and I never thought going to school or doing the things I've done, I would end up in coffee. Actually, another strange part of the story is my first job after finishing high school. My summer job was at Obompen, which is now a multinational company. So, brewing coffee, as well as doing sandwiches and selling pastries. So, coffee by default must have been integrated into my life. So, that's how coffee became a vehicle for me to do a lot of the things I wanted to do. And I've been, for the past 10 years now, I've been professionally and entrepreneurially engaged in coffee. And it came out of, one of the things is after Marlboro, you kind of, if you don't do the things you like, you don't do them at all. Or if you do them, you kind of, within a few months or a year, you leave them. And actually, even the organization I work for now, when they interview me, one of the things I tell all my interviewers before they give me a job or when I apply is that maximum I could think of committing is 2 years. Afterwards, if I like it, I stay. If I don't like it, I move on, or if something else comes. And 2 people that gave me the job after saying that are the ones that have employed me the longest so far. And the longest I've ever been employed in any company is 3.5 years. Other than that, either I do something of my own or move on. And so, basically, it's looking at the role of culture and technology in sustainable development. And as you can see, the title, it's Ethiopians, the coffee people. And the more I learn about coffee, the more I realize that there is so much story to be told. And no one has told that story to this day. So I figured, why not make it into a long book project? So this is supposed to be the title for a series of books to come out, starting out next year. And it will kind of make sense that maybe a book is not enough to talk about Ethiopians and coffee. So, and in the process though, I wanted to, unless I get to express myself in it and involve others in the process, then it makes no sense. So the role of culture and technology became relevant. In terms of sustainable development, for me, it's a bit a strange concept, sustainable development, because I came out of Marlboro, it makes no sense. For me, economic well-being, social well-being, and environmental well-being, you should do them simultaneously. I don't want to make a lot of money and use that money to do social work or use that money to do environmental work. If the work I do, the profit I make does not address those things in the process, then for me it doesn't feel like it's sustainable development, but rather charity. So, and that never really made sense to me. So those are the things that would get reflected here in the context of Marlboro. There is maybe 2 things I will highlight here. The reason I ended up coming to Marlboro was because at a college fair, I looked at the name and I thought it was the most ridiculous name for a college. Because for me, the only thing I associated with Marlboro as that is the cigarette. So I stood there and I asked, and they told me about it, and then the rest is history. So that's kind of, it's a lot of coincidence in my stories, but they were never really coincidence, it turns out. And the second part is, you guys may not know her, but I think 92, Maria Plotkin. She was the person, as I was scouting colleges, the person who gave me a tour here. And then some odd years later, at least a decade later, we run into each other at a beach in Tanzania. because she does public health now. So, and Marlboro, when I was here, was 260 students. All the people thought I was crazy for coming to a school like this. But, you know, two people who went to school here who had a, you know, she gave me the campus tour. So either I would like it or not like it because of her. But I liked it enough to come here, and I meet her in Tanzania. So world life is as small as it gets. So Maya has already gone through. But for Grounds for Health, it's basically the most recent company I worked for out of these three. The other two, my wife owns them. We co-founded them. I'm not good at running businesses. So I don't try to do things I'm not good at, because even if they're profitable, I might get bored once they become routine. So rather than that, she's a very good business manager. So I leave it to her. Grounds for Health, I like it because it brings everything together for me. I do cervical cancer prevention work in coffee growing communities, and I get to manage the program. There's a lot of strategic stuff that I'm concerned with. The reason I came was to attend a board retreat in South Carolina, and it's based out of Williston, so it brings me back to my Vermont roots. And I got introduced to them because when they come to Ethiopia to do program interventions, a friend of mine in coffee referred them to buy coffee from my wife's shop. And when basically here I finished biochemistry. I never went back to school. Immediately 1 year I did my master's at UMass. After that, I don't think there was a point going back to school because I didn't really like other schools. The way the academic program is designed here is quite engaging, where I decided my schedule and everything, and going back to a different culture of learning, it was very difficult for me. So within 1 year, I finished my master's. And after I found coffee, though, I went back to Italy to do a second master's in coffee economics and science. And switching back to economics was never really a switch, because in Marlboro, the only thing you learn is how to analyze and how to write. It doesn't matter what you do. So those are the things that kind of carried over throughout my life. And it took me maybe a good 20 years to realize it. I didn't realize it until like 2 years ago, how much Marlboro really meant. And that's the time when I started engaging with here as well. Because online, a lot of my classmates or schoolmates, we discuss, we chat on Facebook and things like that. And some of the things they do is so amazing and fascinating. And it is a community that I can say anything and do anything, and there will always be an open reception. So that wasn't something, that is not normal in the rest of the world. So, you know, it's my comfort zone. And this is my wife, Sarah. And she not only runs the business, but also has this amazing capacity to relate with people. I am a very extrovert, but introvert when I want to be. And as I get older, I'm becoming more introvert. And so she does most of she's more famous than I am. I was telling Maya when I come here, I don't think I've ever seen myself in such a reflective way as much as I've seen myself on this campus because of the posters. So that was quite strange. And also we involve our kids. We have 4 product brands, and 2 of them are our daughters' names. So we have 2 daughters. And the businesses here you see are Slow Brew Coffee Safaris is a coffee tourism company. That just got launched last year as a subcomponent of Ya Coffee, and it has become operational, and we're doing tours in Ethiopia, both educational and non-educational. And Ya Coffee is a roasting company, but it's becoming more. It's starting to process coffee and also retail coffee. So that's a mix. So that was kind of an odd reflection for me. Coffee is making me famous in a way, I guess. Most of you know coffee as a beverage. But as you can see, there is a hand behind it. And the amount of hands involved in coffee is amazing. And all of them have their own stories to tell. That is what I'm interested in. If it ends up being profitable and a tool for community development and a tool for learning, great. But I'm more interested about people's stories. And I also think that I don't think I was ever that kind of person before. But through the years, one of the things that you develop here is a reading culture, a Marlboro. Because if you don't read a Marlboro, you're not going to read anywhere. So through that reading, one of the things I picked up is a lot of stories. So throughout my school years afterwards, even after I left, I'm not a big fan of fictions, but anything news, non-fiction, this, that, technical, I read. It's just a normal thing to do. So those are the things you could benefit out of this. And also other, most people know the roasted coffee, but that's as far as they get, especially in the rest of the world, because most non-urban dwellers that grow coffee know coffee as this. But this might be a very typical coffee tree for Ethiopia and Ethiopia only. Maybe a few other Central and Western African countries have that. Because most coffee, it looks like a shrub, it grows this high, but that's a cultivar, a cultivation variety. This is, coffees in Ethiopia are trees. This is like 5-6 meters high. It's like the tree, you see the apple trees, orchards outside. So it's really a different system of cultivation. And it's also the majority of coffee in Ethiopia is either in the forests, whether they be managed or not, or in the gardens. So when Ethiopians first decided to domesticate coffee, they made it into a garden fruit. So it was never really developed. It's only after it left Ethiopia and the Dutch got a hold of it that it became a cash crop. Before that, it was never a cash crop. And in Ethiopia, until maybe 40 years ago, very few people considered coffee a cash crop. To this day, coffee is social in Ethiopia. If 30 years ago, you asked people to pay for the coffee you pour them, they will find you a very strange person. Maybe even feel insulted by it, because coffee is something you invite people to spend time with you and drink with you. That means they're friends and they're acquaintances and the like. So it's a platform for engagement, not for making money. So that is something that has changed over the years as Ethiopia has urbanized. And Ethiopia to this day is primarily rural dwellers. About 22% are urban dwellers. So maybe one of the last frontiers in the world where urbanization has not taken hold yet. And Ethiopia is not a small country. It's 110 million people. So it's 1/3 the size of the US. So this is the fruit, if you haven't seen it. It's a drupe, like an olive. You see another hand there, that's coffee being dried. And that's my wife's hand. It's getting sorted and graded accordingly. So it has to go through so many processes before you see it as a nice fruit. You enjoyed the cup of coffee here, but before it got there, a coffee tree gives a fruit once a year. It gets processed. The processing takes about 3 to 4 months. The logistic takes about another month or 2 to get here. So you drink it 6 months or after it's been harvested and processed. So the cup of coffee that takes 5 minutes to make has taken a whole lot of resources to get there. So, and in the world, there are about 25 million smallholder coffee farmers. They grow the majority of the coffee. And fortunately and unfortunately for Ethiopia, about 5 to 6 million of them are Ethiopians. And Ethiopia only grows about 5% of the world coffee. So it's because it's a smallholder farmers that grow it. It's a garden crop. And So that gives you the dynamics of it. And another fascinating thing is there are about 130 plus coffee species in the world. Coffee Arabica is just one of them. But it's the only one that's tetraploid, meaning that we're diploid. We take haploid from our parents, two haploids, one from the male, one from the female. Fertilization happens, and we get diploids. It's two distinct species that literally hybridize and start giving offspring. And that is what made Coffee Arabica so fascinating, because you only need one tree to get a fruit. And if you take that fruit, only one fruit, and plant it, it gives you seedling. It gives you another generation because it self-fertilizes. So it's the only one out of the 130 plus. So I don't know what the frequency is for such a hybridization to take place, but it's not normal. So, and it happened about some 300,000-400,000 years ago. And so it's pre-human, but modern humans. And we've started maybe consuming it a few thousand years ago. It's assumed about 1,500 years ago, but unlikely, because Ethiopians are one of the first agricultural communities in the world, sedimentary lifestyle. The topography doesn't suit very well for there are parts that are nomadic and there are parts that are not. So if you already know how to practice agriculture, and if you already hunter and gatherer before that, then it made no sense to think that they wouldn't consume fruit. And in Ethiopia, coffee is food first. When it started out historically, it was never a beverage. People consumed the fruit first as some kind of energy bar, and then that's how it came about. So this is where the human resource development aspect of it, for me, for the learning aspect of it, comes. Because if you're an anthropologist, you can study so much about coffee and get lost. Coffee by itself is enough for me, because there's so many things it's hard to get bored in coffee. Even in coffee, it's hard to stay focused. So those are the things that I pay attention to, at least. This is a Financial Times article in 2019. When you brew that coffee and serve it in any cafe you see, most of the consuming places, the value of the coffee is 4%. The biggest earner out of the coffee, the price of the coffee you pay, whether it be $2 or $3, is the guy who owns the real estate. So it's better to be a real estate developer, really, to make money out of coffee. Or it's better to be the human resource that is employed by the coffee shop. That's where the most cost goes to, from that cup. Or be the government that collects the tax. Even the people who open the coffee shop, they still make about 10% profit. So they're not the biggest, really, beneficiaries of the coffee. The cups and the napkins and the stirrers, they cost more than the coffee. So that just gives you... So anything that takes place after the roasting, the coffee is 4%, 96% of it, of the value, goes towards somebody else. And I put an asterisk on that purposely, because the majority of coffee does not get roasted domestically in growing countries. It gets roasted, and from roasting, we take that 4%, and then we make it into a total again, 100%, and 80% of it goes to the roaster. 2% goes to the guy sitting in Addis or something, exporting the coffee. Another 3% goes to the car owner that transports the coffee from coffee growing communities. And about 4% goes to the business person that sits in coffee growing communities processing the coffee. And 10% of goes to, and we're talking about out of the 4%, okay? To convert this, 96 is gone in consuming countries. If the roaster is based here, another 3.2%, 80% of is 3.2%, 3 points, so 96 plus 3.2. The rest is in producing countries. So when you think about sustainable development, the whole business model, the whole arrangement, then it makes you wonder. So the grower who allocates his land, time, resources to grow the coffee gets a chamche. The rest, they're not waiting a year. They're doing something else during that year. The farmer, though, it's not like he's doing something else. He's harvesting what the land gives him. So Ethiopia, as I told you, they got that many people. About 30 million people depend on coffee. Still is the largest foreign currency earner from product exports. Ethiopia, though, it's lucky in a way because we only export about 40 to 45% of our coffee. The rest is consumed. Only Brazil consumes, but in Brazil, they had to go through a lot of promotion to encourage domestic consumption. In Ethiopia, it's the reverse. Because the economy needs a lot of dollars to import a lot of the infrastructure building it needs, we actually have a law that says you cannot consume good quality coffee domestically, because if it allows it, we might end up consuming it. So, we produce about 470,000 tons a year, and we only export 40 to 45% of that. So in Ethiopia, which is an ad market, because there is no one that protects an export market and discriminates against its domestic market. Everybody wants to encourage the domestic market. I go around in other African countries and producing countries talking about how you grow domestic consumption. In Ethiopia, it's hard to do that. But it kind of captures how poverty influences decision making. Because the government wants the dollars to buy a whole lot of things that are required for investment and development, infrastructure building and the like. So if it doesn't do that, populations complain. At the same time, for a farmer, the biggest market is right next door, meaning right there. They don't even need to export it. So they don't need to pay a transport fee. They don't need to pay somebody else to process it, because whatever they process domestically, they could just sell it right there. But they're not allowed to do that for just that reason. Rationalizing coffee, we kind of had to look at it because we opened a health store some 11, 12 years ago, and it didn't work out. But we didn't want to close it because most of the health inputs that we wanted to introduce to the market were being imported. So we wanted to do something that is local. And both me and my wife were fed up working for NGOs, or she worked for the World Bank and the like. So we asked. And then we said, we'll do something local, something that involves biochemistry, and something that would be fun and profitable and socially relevant. So we picked coffee from honey and natural gums, like gum olivino, frankincense, gum myrrh. Those are, if you extract them using state-of-the-art technology and ensure biosafety, they're input for pharmaceutical industries or perfume industry, cosmetic industry. And you could make a whole lot of financial returns with them. But the investment was expensive. So coffee was less costly, roasting coffee. Even in Ethiopia, opening a coffee shop is very expensive because the market is there. The competition is there. So for you to be relevant and competitive, you have to invest money. So we went with the route where it didn't need that much money, where your knowledge and skills made all the difference. So it made both me and my wife happy. She's also into fashion design and things like that. So she makes these amazing bags for gift bags as a corporate gift items and the like. Coffee is consumed culturally and commercially in Ethiopia. So it will be easier to integrate it into a sustainable development model that we had. And the other thing is all that accident I told you about, Arabica happening, it happened within the forest systems of Ethiopia and some of the neighboring countries. So there is an origin story to tell. And also, if you've seen the map, Ethiopia is an amazing place to grow coffee. That's why it happened naturally. High elevation. In Ethiopia, growing coffee at 2,000 to 2,600, it's normal. It's not a big deal. That's why Ethiopian coffee is highly priced. It's because in other parts of the world, 1,500 is considered a highland coffee. In Ethiopia, 1,500 is because when the elevation goes up, the floral note of the coffee becomes more visible. So it tastes like flower. So it's highly appreciated. And also, coffee, in a way, we found out that it was more of a platform rather than really a business by itself. Because when you're involved in coffee, it's hard to avoid honey. Because usually, beekeeping takes place. Ethiopia also produces a lot of honey, in the top 10 in the world. But interestingly, consumes 90-95% of it domestically. And we make honey wine with it as well. That's one of the reasons. We have an traditional alcoholic beverage. And I actually do make coffee-infused honey wine as well. It's biochemistry, it's fermentation, so couldn't get any better. It's like mead, but caffeinated with coffee. So that's, basically the roast at origin operation, it took a while to build, but it's coming along, most probably in November. Actually, it will be available in the US market in November. So my friend and business partner with Gretchen, Justin will be distributing it through his outlet. These are our staff. One of the things we figured out, it was a learning curve for us, was me and my wife. In Ethiopia, men don't know coffee. The people who know coffee in Ethiopia are women, which is complete reverse. And it occurred to us when a friend of ours, a company from the US was visiting, and literally, I'm the only guy in the business right now. All of them are women. And they're like, oh, so the women roast, the women process, the women grade? I say, yeah. And like, okay. Because here there is a hashtag, she's the roaster. Because a roasting woman is very strange in the rest of the world. In Ethiopia, if a man goes into coffee, it's usually either at the selling point or maybe the cupping point as a professional cupper. And that's only because it's not like men have a better taste, but technically women are a much better tasters than men because they are more ability to differentiate. Their taste buds are much more developed. They most probably have more of them than men. So a coffee cupper, like a wine taster, is highly prized. But because there is an educational degree barrier to be trained as a cupper in Ethiopia, most of them you find are men. Because modern education usually went to the man, historically. And which is kind of strange because Ethiopia started, writing and learning in Ethiopia is in a very old tradition. We have our own script. It's not... but it's usually driven by faith-based institutions. So that made, by default, the training only went to men. So, and one of the other thing is that most of them are migrants. So rural to urban migrants and young people, 18 to 26. So we found it an amazing opportunity to do a lot more. And usually most of them have primary level education. So to be able to do amazing coffee really has nothing to do with education. It has to do with skills, vocational skills. So that kind of triggered. And the other thing we were interested in is coffee tourism. And the other, fascinating thing is this friend and also a driver who takes us around when we do cervical cancer screening and treatment. Those are children I meet drinking coffee in coffee booths. If there is a street food for Ethiopia, it would be coffee. Actually, in Ethiopia, coffee is a social equalizer. Everybody drinks it. It's not, just because you have money doesn't mean you drink coffee in Ethiopia. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity. So those are the parts that became, okay, if I can do my science, if I can do my social work, if I can do my economic work, then what's there? Spiritual, which is fine, because in Ethiopia, coffee is also spiritual. Before Christianity came about in the 3rd and 4th century in Ethiopia, old religions, they had coffee ceremony when they tried to connect with their spiritual realm. So the coffee ceremony that is traditionally now you see is a byproduct of that. So even spiritually it had value. So whether you do religious studies or anthropology, then you could do that with coffee. These folks that you see there, we don't know, but we were having a coffee ceremony for our group, and then they happened to be sitting at another table, but by default they join, and there's no question why they came to the ceremony and joined. And usually, traditionally, it's a woman sitting like that. This is basically, and the roasting doesn't take place anywhere. It takes place right there at home, straight. So green beans, you roast, you grind, you brew, you drink. So there is no value chain. Once you have the green coffee, the value chain is within your domain. And these are the street vendors now. They have commercialized them so that you could literally, maybe there are 100 within a 300-400 yards walk. And you could just pick whichever one you like and you drink. And you just don't go for the coffee in Ethiopia. You could have the most excellent coffee, but if you're not friendly enough, social enough, inquisitive enough, engaging enough, people won't come. Because they're not there just for the coffee. They're there for the intimate social dialogue. So that's that. And Ethiopians drink coffee in a lot of ways. The one you see on the right is coffee with butter. Here, thanks to keto diet, now there is coffee with ghee. Over there is a plant called rue, and we use it for spicing coffee. It has a very nice, bitter but elegant taste. And this is the husk, and Ethiopians consume everything about coffee. We make tea with it, we make coffee with it. And it's something that you could drink with just boiled in a water or boiled in a milk if you want. And another fascinating thing is we also consume the leaf. This is a coffee drink from the leaf. It's not from the beans. And it has cardamom, ginger, pepper, so many things. And it's spicy, really. Cardamom, few other rue, and a few other ones that I can't really translate into Amharic. But it's really spicy, but it still tastes like coffee. And in different parts of the country, people consume it differently. So the culture. But when it comes to culture, if you don't love it first, then you won't see the very nuances that you need to appreciate. and that nuances are the ones you communicate. So this are Ethiopians really, even Ethiopians appreciate the moment it becomes explained. And this is where I realized that maybe there is a really true opportunity to engage anyone, because my assumption was Ethiopians would not be interested, or they know, but they don't, because it's so normal to them, because it wasn't them who discovered it, it was their forefathers. So for them, they just been told this is how we do it. They never asked questions. So with technology, that's what's happening. Actually, one of the things that I did after leaving Marlboro was here in the lab, it was still manual back in the days. There was nothing really automated and fancy. And after I left, I did a lot of protein chemistry work in a biotech company as well as in a cancer research center. And whenever there was an old school method that needed to be done, other labs will even ask me, can you come and do this? Can you troubleshoot this? Because protein chemistry, by then, it was really automated. You have a nice apparatus that's fully closed. There is nice pumps in it. It really creates the balance. You just program it, and it runs it. And in Marlboro, you gotta have, there's no such thing. You get dirty to do the research. So it's that perspective. So even people these days, when they use technology, then unless you really understand what's behind the technology, then the learning is somehow short-sighted. Another cultural part is, these are my two daughters. Usually on Sundays at home, and they drink coffee. They've been drinking coffee since they were 3 or 4. So whenever people ask me, is it okay, is it safe, is it healthy? Yeah, I'm okay, they're okay. Millions of people are okay who've drank coffee all their life. So the challenge comes in when you add sugar. Historically, Ethiopia didn't have sugar until the 1940s or 50s, maybe even 60s. And they had to give it away for free to get people to like it. They didn't like it initially when they were given in the 1950s. So the company literally promoted it in small packets, and whenever you went shopping, they will give you on the side, try this. People in Ethiopia drink coffee with a pinch of salt. So cream and sugar, it's okay.
No sugar.
Yeah, no sugar, all right. So in terms of technology, I said, okay, where can we go with that? Standardization was one of them. So when I did my master's at Eli Coffee in Italy, they have a university program. The other fascinating thing was there was a coffee company in partnership with universities who started doing master's program in coffee economics and science. That's where I met Justin. Yes. So, and both of us were class of 2016. And so coffee made me go back to school. And it was kind of fascinating. But, there are two methods. Ethiopian coffee, to brew it, you could start with cold water or hot water. But the outcome is different because the contact time is different. When you start with cold water, it takes longer to boil, so the contact time is longer. So the flavor profile is different. So this is where technology comes in. And I don't know how far it will go, but I'm talking to a few folks at MIT and Tufts to do a physical and chemical characterization of this. The chemical part on the brew, the physical, the thermodynamics part on the system. So that, what are the variables? What are the key parameters because this one is a handcraft, and most of them in Ethiopia are done by hand. So each product is different, it's not optimized. So this is the science part that comes in. So, and this is the idea, knowledge-based society for sustainable development. I think if you really have a truly knowledge-based society, then sustainable development, you could only not do it if the knowledge is not really there. But if the whole society is knowledge-based, then it's different. That's my philosophical argument. But To get there, you have to have first a knowledge-based industry. And in Ethiopia, it's not knowledge-based industry, coffee at least. So whatever you want to do, social sciences, agriculture, environmental sciences. One of the things that was fascinating for me that I'm going to be documenting in one of these books is that Ethiopians traditionally had this fermentation process before they dry the coffee as a natural sun-dried coffee. So they harvest the cherry, they let it sit for a few days, and then I asked why they do that. And the farmer said, oh, the hulling process becomes easier because the fermentation eats the husk and really loosens it. So when it dries, they don't need a lot of mechanical force to hull it. So all these traditional knowledges, if you standardize them, but nowadays the specialty coffee sector, it talks about fermentation, we did the processing this way, it tastes this way. So maybe we need to go back and see the things we could harvest from traditional knowledges. And the other one is the one sector within the coffee value chain that doesn't have an industry is seed. I'm not trying to be Monsanto. But the seed industry, especially in the age of climate change, is very critical because Ethiopia has 90+% of the genetic diversity for Arabica coffee. The rest of the world only has 10. So share the wealth, but if you need to benefit from it, then you need to industrialize it first. And the moment you want someone trained as a biotechnologist, then the investment you have to make in the education system becomes that much greater. And that leads towards a knowledge-based economy and then society. So for me, there is no point really trying to sell green coffee. Nothing will change. And consumers are not even happy when they see those graphs where the farmer only gets this much. He's fighting with the other processors locally to access about 1% of the 0.8% of the benefit. Nobody thinks that's fair. So if consumers don't think it's fair, then the system has an opportunity to change. The reason it's not changing is because people in the value chain don't see the need to change it. The arts. I've seen so many amazing paintings and photography works of nature, coffee ceremonies, cultures, people doing amazing things. So, and you could even do theater if you want to. Because one of the things that Ethiopia development partners, they spend millions of dollars investing in Ethiopia to do behavior change. And the only way you get people together to discuss and change behavior in the long run is through coffee ceremony. If you invite them for coffee, they come. So even that could take place. So you could have a dialogue of whatever issues you have. My mom works for the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts, and she deals with immigrants, especially on health issues, domestic violence issues, and other related issues. And becomes much easier for her to engage them the moment she makes it into a coffee ceremony. Because there are a lot of Ethiopian Eritreans, a lot of East Africans in Massachusetts. So you could go into so many things. The way forward, learning and development, entrepreneurship, community building, that's where Wilmington counts. To make the story short, I wrote my college saying, okay, there is an opportunity in Wilmington. I wrote Marlboro here. I don't think you were there at that time. You were here. Yes. So you were just coming on board. Yes. And I said, I like this thing, but there's no way I'm going to live here. And I have to partner with people. And would there be someone in the Southern Vermont community who would be interested to apply for this business plan? I do have the idea, but it's not just going to be my idea unless they say, I don't know anything and I just want to partner. And then nothing came. So there was a coffee event in Amsterdam. Me and Justin were going to meet there. He came, he brought his friend. My friend Justin is in the Navy Reserve, and he was stationed in Germany. And he came up while we were talking. I told him this. And another friend who already bought a house with his family in Wilmington, Brian and Crystal, they said, yeah, we're interested. I say, okay, we'll apply. And we applied, and we're trying to bring in more people into the collaborative. That's Haystack. And I asked Brian, would you ever have moved here if Wilmington project didn't? He said 99% no. That was what sold it for me. So I've increased the population of Vermont by one family.
No, seriously, and they have children.
They have 2 children, yes. So one family, I said. Yes, one family. And Justin and his wife have also bought a property in northern Vermont, but they always liked Vermont. So, but I think this has sold it, maybe. But this is how it goes when it's coffee, and in a way when it's Marlboro. Yes, and for me, there's certain things you do for profit. There's certain things you do for non-profit. Right now, Dye Coffee, it will either keep that name or the Coffee People Incorporated will become the name. I haven't decided. And it's to do non-profit primarily work. How do you institutionalize this? Because for me, partnership, collaboration, and leaderships are a critical part of that. And focus on coffee, honey, and maple maybe, because I'm here. Because one of the things we always have is whenever we go into a community, we really have to take what's already there and add something to it. So I already know how to make honey mead. I don't know if maple is appropriate for mead making, but I'm sure if you ferment it just right, it will make a kick-ass mead, for a lack of a better word. And if you infuse it with coffee, then I'm sure it will be a hot cake to sell in Vermont. But this is the kind of stuff. But in the process, you learn, and there will be somebody else taking this knowledge to practicalize it. And there is no really attachment to anything that is possessive. The attachment is that, oh, I was a part of that. And maybe I won't be tomorrow, or maybe I might walk away from the beginning. But in most of the work we do, there's so many people's ideas in it, it's not even funny. It's hard to call it my wife's company or my company I co-found. It's hard to say that, especially when it comes to coffee. And the passion is there, but here is, in a way, how it relates. This vision is plastered on our wall. Basically, 2035, we want to have our own Institute of Technology. A small, but really vibrant. The idea is basically to do College of Agriculture and Environmental Science, biotechnology and engineering, entrepreneurship and leadership. And this is the vehicle. That's why we always say higher education is our destiny. Because the learning and teaching process, there is something fascinating about it. Because it's never